The stereotypical image of a Viking is that of a fierce warrior pillaging across Europe, pillaging treasure and mead hall. But these guys weren't just tough fighters. They were also pioneers who explored and settled distant lands, farmers who grew crops and raised livestock, and families who just wanted to live their lives. And like most of us, they probably had trouble sleeping. In fact, there's a lot about Viking sleep that's brutal, uncomfortable, dangerous, and not what you might expect. So grab your helmet and shield because we're going to take you back in time to learn the brutal truth about Viking sleep. Most Vikings lived in homes called long houses. Big open rooms where an extended family or clan shared everything. These long houses could be home to dozens of people sleeping, cooking, and eating together. There was no such thing as a bedroom with four walls and a door, so privacy was non-existent. Your bed was just wherever you could find room, which was usually against the wall, because that's where the builders put the benches. But don't call dibs on the bench yet. Even though some long houses had multiple levels, the beds were usually just built-in platforms made of wood or stone, covered with straw and animal skins. If you want to know how comfy that is, try lying down on a bag of leaves for a night. Fleas, lice, mites, and other vermin loved crawling all over those surfaces. And if you spent too much time on the wrong side of the bed, you'd probably wake up with new tattoos in the form of insect bites. Now, if you think your apartment's heating bill is crazy, try keeping a fire going all day and night to heat your house. No chimneys meant that every Viking household was filled with thick, choking smoke, especially in colder months. This would have irritated their lungs and contributed to respiratory problems. And speaking of fires, the longhouse's main open fire was also used for cooking. And you can probably guess how appetizing that smoke-filled air smelled after a hearty stew had been simmering over the flames for a while. That's right, your dinner tasted like campfire. Longhouses also housed the clan's livestock, which would be kept at one end of the structure. The animals would provide warmth, and their droppings would be used as fertilizer for crops. Not exactly the ideal roommate situation. Imagine trying to sleep with the stench of stale waste and the constant bleating, mooing, or squealing of pigs, sheep, goats, cattle, and chickens filling your ears all night long. Yeah, we didn't think you'd get any sleep either. And when the animals needed to let loose on the other end of the longhouse, you wouldn't exactly get any privacy for that either. It's like having an outdoor toilet right next to your bed. In fact, it's worse than an outdoor toilet. It's an outdoor toilet that all of your friends and neighbors could see and smell. To add insult to injury, the smells of food, waste, and livestock would combine with the lingering scent of stale sweat and dirty laundry to create a bouquet that would make you wish you could just climb into your bed and disappear. And don't even think about hiding under the covers, because the bedding wasn't much better. Animal hides might have seemed like a good idea to stay warm, but they also harbored fleas and other creepy crawlies. We mentioned the tattoo effect earlier, but things could get a lot worse. Some infestations could cause painful swelling, fever, and even death. Vikings also liked to keep things tidy compared to some other medieval cultures. They bathed regularly, usually once a week. But that doesn't mean they were squeaky clean. Bathing was great for getting rid of dirt and sweat, but it didn't really stop the spread of germs and parasites. And even if everyone washed their hands before dinner, how clean were those hands in the first place? Villagers handled raw meat, dirty animals, and chamber pots, so they never really had a chance to be sanitary. Another similarity between Viking and modern life is that we're both constantly bombarded with distractions, whether it's our phones or the news. Sometimes it seems like there's no escape, but it was just as bad back in the 8th to 11th century, because unlike us, Vikings only got one shot at peace and quiet. Back then, sickness and death could strike at any moment, so you had to take advantage of the present. And if you were a Viking, that meant working until your muscles ached and collapsing onto a pile of straw for bed. If you've ever fallen asleep mid-sentence or woken up from a strange noise, you know how jarring it can be. Now imagine that happening every night. Loud noises and sudden movements were constant threats. Raids, invasions, or ambushes could happen at any time, even in the middle of the night. So Vikings were always prepared. They slept with their weapons close at hand and ready to defend themselves. For those living in settled areas, the danger of a raid meant they were always on a high state of alert. Deep, restful sleep became a luxury. They had to be ready to drop everything and fight off an attack or flee for safety. It was a stressful way to live, and being constantly stressed out is a surefire way to mess with your sleep. Of course, not all Vikings were out to plunder and pillage. Many farmed the land and herded livestock, but even for them, life wasn't exactly peaceful. A farmer's work is never done. Crops need tending, fences need repairing, and animals need shepherding. And if a Viking's livestock wasn't enough to deal with, imagine trying to herd reindeer. These skittish animals are notoriously difficult to wrangle. And you can probably guess what happened when they spooked. Yep, you guessed it. Another sleepless night. At sea, sleep was just as precarious. Sailors slept in leather sleeping bags under a sail for a bed, exposed to the wind, rain, and cold. And they were subject to the constant rocking of the waves. Try sleeping on a boat sometime. It's not easy. Being a Viking was a tough gig, and a person's body would probably be in a constant state of pain. Men and women alike did hard physical labor, so aches, cuts, bruises, and sprains were common. Farming brought its own set of discomforts, too, and warfare meant injuries and diseases picked up on the battlefield. With all those ailments plaguing them, it's no wonder Vikings had trouble getting a good night's sleep. There was one thing that Vikings had in common with modern humans: snoring. It could be loud and obnoxious. Now, imagine if you're trying to sleep in a crowded longhouse with several dozen people round you. Just one loud snorer could ruin the whole night. And if someone was restless or had to use a latrine in the middle of the night, well, you can forget about getting back to sleep. Privacy wasn't an option, and a single person's needs could disrupt everyone else's slumber. Their sleep patterns were also a bit unusual by today's standards. You see, Vikings practiced what's called polyphasic sleep. Instead of sleeping in one long stretch, they slept into segments, usually waking up around 4 a.m. and going back to sleep after a few hours. Then they'd wake up again around noon and stay awake the rest of the day. Now, this might sound like a lifestyle choice, like those extreme polyphasic sleep schedules that some internet gurus recommend. But it was actually more of a necessity dictated by the seasons. In the long summer days, they worked late and rose early, taking advantage of all the daylight hours. But the long, dark winters allowed for more segmented rest. After all, what else were they gonna do while it was dark outside? Of course, not everyone stuck to this schedule religiously. People usually tried to sleep as much as they could whenever they could. But sometimes it just wasn't possible. Winter was a hard time for Vikings, and many struggled to grow crops or raise enough livestock to eat. Famine was a constant threat, and people often went to bed hungry. When you're hungry, it's hard to fall asleep, especially when you're constantly worried about where your next meal will come from. Add to that the stress of potential war or attack, and you have the perfect recipe for a restless night. And those are just the external factors that might have kept Vikings up at night. What about their internal clocks? We're not talking about those little clocks on our microwave ovens. We mean the circadian rhythms that control sleep-wake cycles. Like most animals, humans' internal clocks are regulated by light and darkness. But unlike most animals, humans have found ways to override their biological clocks. Artificial light means we can stay up late watching TV, playing video games, or scrolling through social media. But this wasn't an option for Vikings. Their sleep-wake cycles were more aligned with the sun, but that meant incredibly short sleeping periods during the summer months. With all these factors combined, it's no wonder that Vikings had trouble sleeping. Longhouses were noisy, uncomfortable, unsanitary places to sleep. Their bodies ached from hard work and battle, and they couldn't turn off the mental noise of their worries and fears. But maybe that's what made them so tough. Maybe it takes sleepless nights to build a fearless Viking. Now watch what happens when you sleep naked or check out. You won't believe what this fruit does to your body. Sleep